The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the Competitive Personal Responsibility Education Program, Competitive Prep Orientation Webinar. Before we get started, I wanted to run through a few administrative items that will assist everyone with participating in today's web event. And just a few things that our expectation is the webinar will answer many questions and concerns, but additionally, every attempt will be made to answer questions posed by participants at the conclusion of the webinar. Really quickly, I want everyone to turn their attention to the webinar attendee interface, which is made up of two parts. The viewer window on the left, which allows you to see everything the presenter will share on their screen, and the control panel at the right. Within the control panel is how you can participate in today's web event. You may simply type in the question at the question box at any time during the presentation and click send, and any questions will try to be answered at the conclusion of the webinar. We don't anticipate any issues with today's web event, but if for any reason technical difficulties do arise during this event and the audio and screen views can be lost, please attempt to dial in and log back into this webinar through the original invite that you received in your email. If access is still unable to be regained, please check your email inbox for updates regarding rescheduling the webinar event. We'd now like to begin the webinar presentation. Thank you for attending, and I'd like to introduce Itish Bailey.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Itish Bailey, and I'm one of the project officers in the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program within the Family and Youth Services Bureau. We'd like to just take a moment to congratulate you on being awarded a competitive prep grant. We at the Administration for Children and Families are excited about the new programs and looking forward to working with you all. During today's webinar, we will discuss the following. First, we'll have some welcome and introductions. We will give an overview of the Family and Youth Services Bureau. We'll also talk about program requirements. You'll hear about performance measures and evaluation. We'll talk about additional requirements. You'll receive administrative information. We'll talk about the submission, how to submit federal financial progress reports, and then you'll receive a list of websites and resources. And of course, at the end of the webinar, we'll leave time for any questions and answers. First, I wanted to inform you about key federal staff within the management for ACYF, which is the Administration on Children, Youth, and Families, is Brian Samuels, who is the commissioner. Debbie Powell is the Acting Associate Commissioner for the Family and Youth Services Bureau. Risa Matthews is the Director of the Division of Adolescent Development and Support. Mark Clark, who you will hear from today, is the Director of the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program, which is where the competitive prep grants sit. And project officers within the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program are Sarah Axelson, who you'll be hearing from today, myself, Therese Jones, Cree Spears DeLeo, Jewel Lynn Tinsley, and Labrita White. We also have on the webinar today with us Mary Alexander, who is the grant specialist for competitive prep grantees within the Office of Grants Management, and she will share some important information with you about reporting requirements related to competitive prep. So first, I'll start with an overview of the Family and Youth Services Bureau. Within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is the Administration for Children and Families, which we refer to as ACF. Within ACF is the Administration on Children, Youth, and Families, which we refer to as ACYF. And within ACYF is the Family and Youth Services Bureau, which you will hear us refer to as FISB. ACF is comprised of 6 offices, including the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families, as seen in this diagram. ACF also includes the Office of Head Start, the Office of Family Assistance, the Office of Community Services, the Administration on Native Americans, and the Administration on Developmental Disabilities. ACF administers federal programs that provide social services to promote positive growth and development of children, youth, and families. Programs that provide protective services for children and youth in at-risk situations, and also programs that support Adoption for Children with Special Needs. These programs provide financial assistance to states, community-based organizations, and academic institutions to provide services, carry out research and demonstration activities, and undertake training, technical assistance, and information dissemination. Within ACYF are the Family and Youth Services Bureau, again we refer to that as FISB, and also the Children's Bureau. FISB is comprised of the Division of Adolescent Development and Support and the Division of Family Violence and Prevention Services. The Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program, as well as the Runaway and Homeless Youth Program, are within the Division of Adolescent Development and Support. So, FISB's mission. The mission of the Family and Youth Services Bureau is to promote safety, stability, and well-being for people who have experienced or been exposed to violence, neglect, or trauma. FISB achieves this through supporting programs that provide shelter, community services, and prevention education for youth, adults, and families. Within the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program are the following areas. First, there's state PrEP, which funds 49 state and territory grantees to implement evidence-based and effective teen pregnancy prevention programs. Competitive PrEP, with 37 grantees funded, which started this year. Tribal PrEP, with 16 awards to tribes and tribal organizations to implement culturally relative, comprehensive teen pregnancy prevention programs. The State Abstinence Education Grant Program, with approximately $37 million of the $50 million available to 37 states and territories. Competitive Abstinence, which funds 9 grantees. And last but not least, PrEP Innovative Strategies, which we refer to as PREUS, which funds 12 organizations to rigorously evaluate the effectiveness of innovative teen pregnancy prevention models. The legislative authority for the program in the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2010. Here you can see the types of programs that the funding is allocated toward. Now I'll speak to you about program requirements. The purpose of competitive PrEP is to enable organizations to support personal responsibility education programs that replicate evidence-based effective program models or substantially incorporate elements of effective programs that have been proven on the basis of scientific research to change behavior, which means delaying sexual activity, increasing condom or contraceptive use for sexually active youth, or reducing pregnancy among youth. Key program requirements for competitive PrEP are that the program must emphasize both abstinence and contraception for the prevention of pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. It must include at least 3 of the 6 adulthood preparation subjects, which are listed here, and the program must replicate an evidence-based effective program or incorporate elements of an effective program. These requirements are specifically stated in the legislation for PrEP. Additional program requirements are that all programs are required to collect information related to the federally developed performance measures. Grantees funded at more than $500,000 must conduct an implementation study and dedicate a minimum of 10% of their budget towards those efforts. Grantees, if selected, must participate in a rigorous federal evaluation. All programs must be medically accurate, age appropriate, and be accessible to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and queer or questioning youth. And the program must be fully functioning within at least 180 days of the grant award. Grantees are strongly encouraged to maintain fidelity to the model that they have selected. Fidelity refers to how well the program is implemented without compromising any of the core components. We understand that some grantees will need to adapt program models. Adaptations should generally be minimal, but any significant adaptations may be needed to address the prep requirements, which are, again, incorporation of the adulthood preparation subjects and emphasis on both abstinence and contraception for the prevention of pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. Again, adaptations should not alter the core components of the program that you are implementing, but for those who may have significant adaptations, please speak with your individual project officer. Grantee expectations for competitive prep are that grantees will participate in monthly or bi-monthly calls with project officers. Project officers will be reaching out to all of their grantees to set up these calls. During these calls, we talk about any obstacles that you may be encountering, share any updates that we may have on the federal side, and we also assess whether or not you have any technical assistance needs. Grantees are also expected to bring up all issues and challenges with your project officer. We also like to hear about any successes that you have experienced. Grantees should participate in site visits, regional meetings, quarterly conference calls, and annual conferences. Grantees must submit all reports on time and via grant solutions, and also submit all post-award requests via grant solutions. And please use your grant number on all official correspondences. Now I will turn this presentation over to Mark Clark, Director of the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program, to share information with you on performance measures and evaluations. Mark?
I'm still on.
Sorry for that interruption, and I hope my voice will be able to carry me through the next few slides. I appear to be under the weather, or I feel like I'm under the weather, and I'm sure my voice sounds like it. Performance measures and evaluations are key components of what we're expecting grantees to report on. The performance measurement itself is a requirement of the grant, and it actually emanates from legislation, GPRA, Government Performance and Results, and the Results Act of 1993. It was amended in 1994, had other kinds of reporting requirements that were frequently referred to as PART, Program Assessment Reporting Tool was the acronym PART. Finally, the Modernization Act of 2010 again reinforces the notion of performance measurement as an important tool for overall assessment of the conduct of projects. The performance measurement also is a learning tool. It's important for us to understand a couple of different things that we'll learn by looking at projects overall from kind of a higher altitude view. That's the contribution of lessons that we'll learn across projects about how to scale up and replicate evidence-based programs. Frequently in the field, this notion of how to take a project that was successful with a couple hundred kids and make it successful for thousands and thousands of kids is the scale-up challenge. There are particular implementation and just operational issues with how one goes about scaling up a project. So that's one of the things we hope to learn by this broad look at performance measurement. And this idea of using data-driven decision-making for program improvement. Again, by being able to look across projects, we hope to be able to offer future program implementers guidance on how best to offer prep programs. I want to emphasize, and then we'll say it more than once, that prep performance measurement is not a data collection tool that's for measuring effectiveness or program impacts. Program impacts require randomized, frequently randomized, but always controlled or comparison group trials and experimental methods that not only are we not funding projects to conduct those types of evaluations, it's outside the scope of what we've asked for in our funding opportunity announcement. We did ask that grantees give us some insight into their capacity to conduct randomized trials, but we did not mean to imply that it was necessary to conduct a randomized trial in order to be successful as an applicant. Next slide, please. The expectations then for performance measurement, broadly speaking, all grantees are expected to look at a uniform set of measures. That set of measures is in fact going to be approved by the Office of Management and Budget. So it will be a uniform set of measures that not only is used by the competitive prep applicants, but is culled from the same set of measures that state prep uses, that the Innovative Strategies projects have used, and that even tribal prep programs use. So you can understand the challenge of trying to find a set of measures that are unify so many differing project strategies and funding streams. The performance measures themselves should actually be approved and available to us by late fall. Grantees will be provided procedures and systems for collecting and checking performance data, including coding, data analysis. There'll be more forthcoming on that with regard to technical assistance and training. And of course, on reporting and dissemination of data. We did ask that successful applicants consider dissemination strategies for their findings, and that, of course, would be one element of what performance measures do. The next slide, please. As a monitoring and program improvement tool, it doesn't help if you collect all this great data and don't share it. So this notion of who are the recipients or who is the audience for this data is really key. Performance measures inform both external audiences, key decision makers, folks at funding agencies, Congress, of course, the original legislators, and the senior staff and leadership within the Administration on Children and Families. The internal audiences are literally those who collect the data are informed in ways that are really key. Project directors, program coordinators, the interventionists, literally those folks who are in the trenches, need to understand about not only accountability but program improvement. It's important to recognize that the way in which performance measures are used is not simply for reporting to Congress, but really are meant to be user-friendly data that programs themselves can harness to improve with each successive cohort how they organize and offer a set of activities to their intended audiences. Next slide, please. So a couple of the characteristics or qualities of performance measures, some of the things that are examples of what's measured by PMs or performance measures. Output measures, again, not to be confused with impact or outcome measures. Output measures are internal to programs, and the other kinds of aspects that performance measures address fidelity and adaptation challenges that are met in the field. Efforts to adapt programs would be something that you would have to document and monitor, because if you think of what performance measures are meant to do, which is tell a story about your program, it would really be helpful to know what you altered on the way to getting to your final outcomes. So this notion of adaptations, whether they're adaptations that are on the fly in the sense of how an instructor might make an ad lib of some sort, or planned adaptations that are done even at a higher level, really important to keep track of. For that reason, measuring fidelity is done with tools and assessments that are routinely reported. Other aspects include efforts for capacity building that might be training, partnership and coalition building. Outcome measures that are routinely reported include behavioral outcomes, pre-post assessments of knowledge gains and intentions, and then finally community data tends to be data that might be publicly reportable and available at a really broad level. It's Often a requirement that particular institutions may have, for example, if you serve school-aged youth, data collected about family poverty might be useful for school lunch program purposes. So that community data is also frequently, routinely reported data, birth rates, death rates, disability, and so forth. Finally, I would just encourage grantees to not feel limited by these aspects of performance measures. Those that are more suited to your program, that an independent evaluator or academic, scholarly principal investigator develops in order to monitor your program could be very useful, and we'd love you to share them with us. So again, dissemination being key to what we're after. Next slide. As noted earlier, only grantees above a certain award level will be required to conduct implementation evaluations. The purposes of the implementation is to provide the grantees and, again, fellow administrators ongoing and detailed feedback. I'd like to reiterate that the designs that are consistent with the implementation evaluation are not required to address impacts and therefore should not be seen as limited to experimental designs that involve control groups or randomized controlled trials. Broadly speaking, an implementation study should document program content. That documentation should be conducted in sufficient detail so that consumers of research or future readers of your dissemination studies could indeed replicate your program. A new or novel way of achieving a certain outcome with looking at the unmet needs of certain target populations needs to be manualized in order to share it with others. This idea of conducting your learning outcomes and your processes and procedures into a kind of how-to guide is the ultimate outcome of a well-designed implementation evaluation. Again, two things that should be documented is was a program implemented as planned? In other words, was there fidelity to the original program plan? And then finally, an aspect that should not be ignored is the experience of participants in the program. It's often very useful and very compelling and a rich source of data to look at the experiences of program participants. They can tell you a great deal about successes and failures with regard to implementation. And once more, I'd like to reiterate, that does not require matched or controlled participants and control groups, so you shouldn't be hampered by the notion of randomization or experimental methods as a barrier to your data collection designs. That concludes the section on implementation, evaluation, and performance measurement. I will hang around for questions and answers, and now I'm going to turn it back to Sarah Axelson.
Good afternoon, grantees. I'm going to take this opportunity to walk you through some additional requirements for those of you participating in the competitive prep program. The first is assurances. Hopefully these should look familiar to all of you, as you were required to provide an assurance that you would meet these requirements in your in your initial funding opportunity announcement application. Grantees will need to ensure that all staff are trained prior to program implementation on how to prevent and respond to harassment or bullying. Additionally, subawardees or subcontractors are required to have in place within 30 days of the grant award, which we have now passed, in fact, policies prohibiting harassment based on race, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity or expression, religion, and national origin. Grantees should also have a plan to monitor subawardee claims, address them seriously, and document their corrective actions. Project officers will likely discuss these assurances with grantees in their initial telephone calls, and you should be prepared to provide documentation of the ways in which you're meeting these assurances should that be requested. Grantees will also be expected to attend, to have two key staff attend the annual conference. This coming year's conference will be held May 29th through the 31st, and it will be in the Washington, D.C. area. We have not sent out exact location information yet or hotel information, but that will be forthcoming from your project officer, so do keep an eye out for that. Additionally, two key staff will be required to attend the regional training. As with the annual conference, information on the dates and locations for regional training opportunities will be sent in the coming months. These conferences and trainings provide an opportunity for grantees to network with other projects, share ideas, lessons learned about what's working, and maybe what's not, or how they could approach it in a different manner. It also gives them face-to-face time with project officers, which we hope is valuable, an opportunity to learn about new FISB business, and an opportunity to learn new strategies and information based on evidence-based findings in the field. We do try hard to respond to grantees' needs for these conferences and regional trainings, and we hope that you get as much out of them as we intend. We also will provide webinars and conference calls. Project officers frequently will provide ongoing technical assistance through webinars like the one you're on today, as well as conference calls and online meetings. Additionally, you should note that some webinars will be provided by our T&TA, our Training and Technical Assistance Support Contractor, RTI International. They will provide webinar trainings, off-site TA, tip sheets, e-updates, and also maintain and support the Community of Practice website. So you may see information about these kinds of events and opportunities come either from your project officer or from the RTI staff, who hopefully has already been in contact with you via email. I'm now going to review just a little bit of administrative information. We'd like to make sure that all of you are clear on the role of the program office. There are, of course, as with many federal grants, various federal offices involved in your work. And so we want to talk just a little bit about the role of the program office versus the role of some of the other offices that you may interact with. The program office, which is, of course, the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Division here in FISB, reviews applications and programmatic reports. We also respond to programmatic and technical aspects of the grant. We ensure that the amounts to be awarded to grantees are consistent with the current statutory requirements, and we also monitor grantee performance via a lot of the methods that we've talked about already. Specifically, project officers should be your contact for all programmatic issues associated with the grant. This includes programmatic requirements, modifications or changes in scope, budget revision requests, changes in staff positions, program progress and financial reports, continuation applications, and monitoring and site visits. Of course, if you have questions about any of these issues or anything else associated with the programmatic side of your grant, we would encourage you to get in contact with your project officer immediately. And your project officers will also reach out to you with information about some of these issues as they come up and as there are important due dates or other information that you need to receive. I'm now going to hand it over to Mary Alexander, who's the grant specialist from the Office of Grants Management, and she's going to walk us through some of their roles as well as their expectations around your participation in this particular grant. Mary?
Thank you. First, I'm going to talk about the role of the Grants Management Office. Grants Office issues all notices of award, thereby providing the Division of Payment Management with the amount of funds authorized for grant recipients. We also review all applications for funding for compliance with applicable regulations. We monitor grants after award issuance for compliance with regulations, and we maintain the official ACF grant file. Next slide, please. The Office of Grants Management consists of multiple grant specialists to carry out the role of the office. We review all applications for grant funds as well as post-award requests from grantees, such as budget revisions, carryover requests, change of project offices, and various others. We create the notice of award for new awards, continuation awards, and to approve post-award requests that require prior ACF approval. We also review the SF-425 semi-annual federal financial report. Our role in performing these duties is to ensure that applicable laws, regulations, and policies regarding grants are followed. Next slide. It is extremely, very important that grantees learn the federal rules and regulations and policies that apply to the grants awarded to their type of organizations. And this slide presents a few of the websites where you can find the OMB circulars and federal regulations. Also, the notice of award and the attachments to the notice of award reference various documents that grantees should become familiar with, including the grants policy statement. Your knowledge and adherence to these regulations and policies can help to ensure that whenever there's an audit or a site visit to monitor your grant, you won't have any findings. So please take some time and go through these for your organization so that you can know that you're in compliance. Next slide. Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 87, prohibits organizations from engaging in religious activities or proselytizing as part of the program or services funded by the grant. That's very important to remember. Next slide. The payment management system. The payment management system is where grant accounts are maintained by the Division of Payment Management, also known as DPM. The Office of Grants Management authorizes the funds via the Notice of Award, and the DPM manages the grant accounts. An accountant at DPM is assigned to each grant and is responsible for processing grantees' requests to draw down funds. When requesting funds from the payment management system, grantees should maintain minimum cash on hand only for immediate disbursements. The Division of Payment Management requires quarterly reporting of expenditures via their website using the electronic version of the SF-425 Federal Financial Report. It's important to note that although the SF-425 is also the report required by OGM, which I'll discuss more in a few minutes, the information provided on it to the Division of Payment Management in a quarterly report is different than the information required in the semi-annual report to OGM. Additional information regarding this was also included in the attachment to your Notice of Award, and it's also available directly from the Division of Payment Management at their website. Grantees are also required to maintain separate accounting of federal and non-federal funds in their organization's financial records, and that is one of the many things that you will be that will be checked during a site visit or an audit. So you want to make sure you keep that in mind. Next slide. Okay, grantees should review the new recipient information document that was included as part of your Notice of Award package. Funds are drawn down electronically through the Division of Payment Management website, which you can see right here identified on this slide. At their website, you can also find the names and contact information for the accountants that are assigned to the grants. The help desk phone number is listed here on the slide also, and you should contact them if you need to set up your account, if you haven't done that already, for new grantees, or to obtain any other information concerning drawing down your grant funds. Next slide. Now I'll talk a little bit more about the financial report, the SF-425 Federal Financial Report required by the Office of Grants Management. This is the semi-annual report. Grantees are required to submit it annually, semi-annually, and to complete the entire form. Once you fill out the quarterly report for the Division of Payment Management, you'll see that the 425 information at the top is only required for that office. But it's important to remember that the OGM report, Office of Grants Management 425 report, must be completed in its entirety. The first report for the current budget period is due by no later than April 30th of 2013 and should cover the period ending March 31st of 2013. The SF-425 must be submitted as an attachment to a grant note via Grant Solutions. And we'd like you to use the naming conventions that we reference on page 8 of the attachment to the Notice of Award that you received a few months ago. Please do not mail any of the reports to ACF. If you do, we will contact you to ask you to upload them into Grant Solutions because that is your official file. Grantees are asked to enter their grant number on all reports and any other types of correspondence regarding their grant. You can see the additional instructions sent to you in the Notice of Award, and feel free to contact your grant specialist, which is me, if you have any questions about anything concerning this particular issue. As of April 2012, ACF began requiring the use of the SF-428 Tangible Personal Property Form and the SF-429 Real Property Status Report. The SF-428 is a standard form to be used by awarding agencies to collect information related to tangible personal property, such as equipment and supplies, when it's required by the award. The SF-429 is a standard report to be used by recipients of federal financial assistance to report real property status or to request agency instructions on property that was or will be provided as government-furnished property or acquired in whole or in part using the federal grant funds. Grantees are required to submit these reports as applicable as frequently as is required in the terms and conditions of your award. For additional information regarding these reports, you can contact your grant specialist. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll now turn it back over to Sarah.
Thank you, Mary. We're going to continue talking about the submission of federal and progress reports. So your performance progress report is typically referred to by project officers as the PPR. It'll be completed based upon the template that we will provide to you, and similar to the financial status report, you will submit your PPR by uploading it through the Grant Solutions system on a semi-annual basis. If you ever have questions about the due dates for your performance progress report or for your financial status report, that information is always contained in the terms and conditions that accompany your notice of award. It'll also be outlined in the grant administration guidance that project officers will be sending to grantees next week. Again, just a reminder to please use your federal grant award number on your report, and also to use the naming conventions that Mary just mentioned listed on page 8 of the attachment to your notice of award. That will help both the program office and the grants office to identify which documentation is being submitted with any particular grant note in Grant Solutions. The performance progress reports will cover a broad area of topics in terms of what you've been working on and provide your project officers with a sense of your progress to date. Many of the program indicators listed, we provide just a little bit of additional detail about what we're looking for, and you can see what those categories are here on the screen. So we'd like you to talk about major activities and accomplishments during this period, challenges, significant findings, any organizational issues that you may be having, as well as TA and training updates, and to give us some sense of the activities that you have planned for the next reporting period. Again, this will all be included in the template that we provide, so you'll be able to see what it looks like laid out in the report format. Performance progress reports are due 30 days after the end of the second and fourth quarters of the budget period, or every 6 months. All progress reports, again, will be submitted through Grant Solutions as an attachment to a grant note, and you'll see here that we provided a list of the report due dates as well as what periods they cover. If grantees need to request a revision or a modification to their current budget, we've provided information about what needs to be included in that request. That includes a cover letter as well as an SF424A and a budget and budget narrative, and you'll see on the screen additional detail about how that documentation should be submitted. Like all other requests, budget modifications should be uploaded into the Grant Solutions system using the post-award amendment package option that you will see for a budget revision or budget modification. If this does happen and you do need to request a budget modification and you have questions about how to do so, you can always contact your project officer or your grant specialist. Other post-award actions that may also be completed in the Grant Solutions system include a request for change of scope, a carryover request, change of the authorized official or program director, as well as non-competing continuation applications. Again, we've mentioned this a few times now, but we want to be sure that everyone is clear that all reports and requests will be submitted via the Grant Solutions system. Here you'll see contact information, including a phone number and email address for Mary Alexander, and each of you should have individualized contact information for your specific project officer. The last thing we'd like to do before we move on to questions is to provide you all with a list of websites and resources that you may find useful as you begin working on your project. This slide contains a list of grant resources, many of which we've talked about on the previous slide. On this slide, you'll see a list of federal pregnancy prevention resources, FISB, the Community of Practice website, as well as the National Clearinghouse for Families and Youth, which we refer to as NCCY, the CDC, the Office of Adolescent Health, and also findyouthInfo.gov. For more information, you can also, of course, check out FISB's website or look at NCCY's website. And then finally, we just wanted to make you all aware that archived webinars and resources are available on FISB's website, and there's a screenshot as well as a link here to the resource library where you can find that information for the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Division. At this time, we'd like to go ahead and answer questions. We do see that some have come in electronically, so we will take a look at those. And just give us 1 second to get the questions up, and we'll be happy to answer them. The first question is, what is the date of the annual conference in May? The annual conference will be May 29th through the 31st. The second question is, if we're funded for less than $500,000, do we have to be evaluated by a third party?
This is Mark Clark. It's not an absolute criteria for accepting an evaluation design. Those people who if you've already successfully been awarded your application based on your evaluation design that was submitted, if that design needs to be altered or modified in any other way, you could talk with your project officer about that. But it's not an absolute priority for those who are under $500,000 to use a third-party evaluator.
Thank you, Mark. The next question is, when will we be notified if we are part of the National Impact Evaluation, since we were funded beyond $500,000?
That's a little more conjectural. I would look to guidance from your project officer with regard to notification, but believe me, we've already begun to review the original applications, and for those applicants that are in consideration, they're already being looked at by our contracted evaluator, Mathematical Policy Research. So there shouldn't be a great deal of time that elapses between the award, your design, your submissions, and being selected to be included.
Thank you. The next question is, can more than 2 key staff attend if budget is approved for additional staff? Typically, when we send out the initial conference registration, we make that available to the specified number of attendees based on the contract and space requirements and limits that we have with the site providing the conference. If we find after the initial registration period that there are additional spaces available, we will typically open those up to grantees, but we have to allow, to grantees to bring additional staff. But we have to allow all of our grantees the opportunity to register their anticipated number first before we make those additional slots available. The next question is, what is the difference between grantees, sub-awardees, and subcontractors? This is a good question. So, and I'm sort of looking here at others in case they want to jump in as well, but typically we would refer to the grantee as the actual agency that has been awarded the funding by ACF, and that is our direct grantee. Many agencies do not necessarily provide direct services to youth, and so they may bring on sub-grantees or sub-awardees, for example, that have health educators on board or that might be providing other kinds of services related to the adulthood preparation subjects. And those agencies may sign some sort of contract or agreement with the grantee agency for the services that they're going to be providing. Typically, they are referred to as sub-grantees or sub-awardees. The language does differ simply based on the relationship that the grantee establishes with that agency through their own contract language. So we do sort of use that interchangeably, just acknowledging that all of you actually use different language for that relationship as well.
The next question is, will we be sending the PowerPoint out to all of the conference call attendees today? Project officers should have forwarded the PowerPoint presentation to all of our grantees. If you did not receive it, please contact your individual project officer so we can forward the presentation to you. The next question is, Are there any ideas about when the training regarding prep performance measures and implementation evaluation will occur?
We'll send that. This is Mark Clark again. We'll keep you posted on those training dates and try to give you as much advance notice as possible via flyers or individual communications from your project officers in your routine or periodic calls.
Thank you, Mark. And the next question is, when will grantees receive the performance progress report template? We will be sending out a grant administration guidance to grantees by the end of next week, and within that guidance you'll receive information about the performance progress report, which will include the template and detailed instructions on how it should be completed.
There are a couple of questions, again, requesting when you'll receive a copy of the slides or the PowerPoint. Again, project officers will ensure that grantees receive that by the end of this week. I anticipate sooner than that, but want to acknowledge that they may not be able to send it immediately this afternoon.
The next question is, in the grant application that was submitted, the budget for year 1 of the project was the only budget that was submitted. When will grantees be required to submit budgets for years 2 and 3 of the program? So grantees will be required to complete what's called a continuation application. And when you complete your continuation application for subsequent years of the project, that's when you'll submit a budget for that next year.
There is a comment that the links associated with information on the slides went by quickly and perhaps too quickly to copy down. We will be sending out, again, a copy of the PowerPoint information for this presentation so that you will have access to all of those links and resources. The next question is, I would like to hand over to Mary if she's still there. Mary, are you with us?
Yes.
Great. So the next question is, what is the allowable percentage of variance before you have to submit a budget revision?
Okay, it's 25% of the award. If the amount, the total amount you're reallocating is less than 25% of your award and you're reallocating the cost to line items that are already in your approved budget, then you are not required to get prior approval to make such a budget revision. However, we ask that you do notify us of those types of changes, regardless of whether you require prior approval before implementing them or not. Also, if you are reallocating funds or want to reallocate funds to costs that are not in your currently approved budget, that does require prior approval, regardless of the amount. And if you want to reallocate funds from direct to indirect or vice versa, regardless of the amount, that requires prior approval. So you would have to submit a revised budget request.
Great, thank you. The next question I think would be good for you as well. It's, can we draw down funds on a reimbursement basis only?
You can draw down funds for reimbursement or you can draw them down in advance. However, if you draw them down in advance, it should only be enough for you to disperse immediately.
Thank you. The next question is, when do grantees who are selected for the federal evaluation find out? And again, I think that's already been addressed by Dr. Mark Clark. The next question is, how do we find out details about backup documentation needed for expenses? Mary, I think that might be an appropriate question for you as well.
Okay, I'd appreciate if that person would email me or call me directly about that. I have some additional questions I need to ask before I can provide the correct answer.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is, any idea when the Florida Regional Grantee Conference will take place? I'm actually not sure what this is referring to. So we will have the annual grantee conference that will be in the Washington, D.C. area. And then we will have regional training opportunities available, but we have not provided details about the locations or dates of those trainings. That information will be forthcoming. The next question I think also is related and has sort of just been addressed, the general idea of when regional conferences are. That will be forthcoming as soon as we are prepared to send out that information. The next question is, will you all send some assessment tools that we will all have to implement from RTI or ACS?
The development of those assessment tools that will be useful for evaluation or performance measurement will be part of the training and TA that's offered in support of that process. And to the extent that those are consistent with that performance measurement scheme, they will be sent out or provided. It's not expected that you have to develop those on your own. I would encourage you, though, if you're adding indicators, if you have specialized needs for your performance measurement system or other kinds of reporting needs that are consistent with your evaluation designs, you might want to consider how you will merge your information needs with the reporting information needs for performance measures. Those kinds of designs often go way beyond what PMs require. So I would just encourage you to be mindful of that, particularly if you have an independent evaluator.
The next question is also related to performance measures. If performance measures are to arrive in fall and we're submitting an IRB in the end of fall, how can we know the content of the questionnaires if we're still waiting for the final performance measures? Will they be similar to the TPP performance measures?
I would encourage you to on a case-by-case basis, work through your project officer to get that information addressed. We can provide you the level of detailed information you would need for those purposes.
The next question is also related to evaluation. Will grantees receiving less than $500,000 be considered for participation in the impact evaluation?
All of the original program proposals have been provided to our contracted evaluator. So the short answer is yes.
Okay. The next question is, will the fiscal year be from October 1st to September 30th for each year? I think there's a couple of different things with regard to this question to be aware of. The federal fiscal year dates are already set, and those will be the same every year. What I think this question is actually getting to is the budget period for the particular grant year, and those are actually subject to change, but they depend, they're outlined every year in your notice of award and your terms and conditions. So the best place to verify those dates for any particular budget period is in your notice of award and your terms and conditions. The next question is, did I understand Mark Clark to have said that you all would like us to share any measures we develop for the project?
Again, that's a judgment call on behalf of an independent evaluator. It's not necessarily consistent with any need we have at this stage of the game to communicate to our contracted evaluator for purposes of the implementation studies or those special site selections. I think it is consistent with your regular reporting and progress reporting to your project officer to discuss what kinds of special measures or special requirements you may have with regard to your data collection and even your data analysis for that matter. So I would suspect that you may share that with project officers, but it's not as though there's an absolute mandate that you must share it with project officers.
Thank you. The next question is, should an external evaluator be considered one of the two key positions to attend the conference, or should attendance of program staff be prioritized? I would encourage you to talk about this on an individual case-by-case basis with your project officer. It may be for your particular grant that an evaluator would be a good fit for attendance at the conference, or it may be that it would be best for program staff. And we will try to send out information or at least a tentative agenda far enough in advance that you can really assess who might be best to attend based on the content. But again, please talk about this on an individual basis with your project officer. The next question is, should an external evaluator be, oh, I'm sorry, that was the one I just did. The next question is, what dollar threshold do we need to use for the SF428 form? So Mary, I think that would be a good one for you. If you need me to read it again, let me know.
Yes, I think you said the SF428, or is it the SF425?
It does say what dollar threshold do we need to use for the SF428 form.
Okay, I will have to have that person call me as well.
Great. So if you have a question about the SF428 form, please contact Mary directly. Next, you mentioned maintaining separate accounts for federal and non-federal funds. Does that apply to sub-grantees also?
Yes, it does apply. And I mean separate accounting for federal and non-federal share. The same rules that apply to the grantees apply to the sub-grantees.
Great. The next question is the person answering the evaluation questions a point of contact for grantee evaluators with 500,000 plus awards that require eval? So your first point of contact should always be your project officer directly. That typically, well, that is not Mark Clark because he does serve as the division director as opposed to one of the project officers, but we can bring him into conversations if necessary around the evaluation. Anything else you want to add?
There may be more detail forthcoming on that. There is an internal reorganization process that has created some internal units of evaluators that may be engaged in this process down the road. So there may be additional contacts, but I would always rely on the project officer as your first line of contact for everything you need.
Thanks. Another question came in about the threshold for the SF428, and we would encourage you please to just contact Mary Alexander on an individual basis if you have questions about the SF428 form. Well, that's all of the questions at this point. We'll give folks just a minute or two to see if there are any additional last-minute questions that come in. So it doesn't look like there are any individual or remaining questions coming in at this time. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Mary Alexander from the Office of Grants Management for participating, as well as to thank Olay Professional Services who supported this webinar. And finally, we'd like to thank you all for taking the time to be a part of this webinar. We at ACF are very excited about moving forward with you all and working on these projects. So we are excited about the coming years, and we hope that you are as well. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon. This concludes the webinar.